The ship appeared from nowhere. One moment, the space around the Valkyrie border station was empty. The next moment, alarms screamed across every screen and every speaker. Officers ran to their posts. Soldiers grabbed their weapons. Everyone stared at the impossible thing floating in the darkness. Thought it was a human. Warship. Station Commander Drell stood at the main window and felt his blood turn cold. The ship was old. Very old. Its design was strange and unfamiliar, covered in markings that no living Valkyrie had ever seen. The hull was damaged and burnt in many places. Ice covered large sections of the metal. But the ship was real, and it was here. "Commander," said one of his officers, his voice shaking, "our scanners show life signs. There are humans alive inside that ship." Drell's 4 eyes narrowed. This was impossible. Every human warship had been destroyed 300 years ago during the Great Conquest. The Empire had made sure of that. They had hunted down every vessel, every weapon, every piece of technology that humans had created. They had burned it all, yet here was a ghost from the past, floating right in front of him. "Send word to the High Council immediately," Drell ordered, "and prepare a boarding team. I want to know what that ship is and where it came from." Inside the HSS Eternal Dawn, Captain Tejo opened his eyes for the first time in centuries. The stasis pod released him slowly. Cold air filled his lungs. His muscles screamed with pain as he tried to move. Everything felt wrong. Everything felt old. He fell forward onto the metal floor and lay there for a long moment, trying to remember who he was and where he was. The mission. He remembered the mission. They had been running from the enemy. The Valkyrie fleet had been everywhere, destroying human ships one by one. The Eternal Dawn was the fastest ship in the human navy, so they had given it the most important job. They had to escape. They had to carry the data to safety. They had to survive, but something had gone wrong. The jump drive had malfunctioned. Instead of taking them to a safe colony, it had thrown them somewhere else. Somewhere far away. The emergency systems had put everyone into stasis to save power. How long had they been asleep? Tejo pulled himself up and looked around. The stasis chamber was dark and cold. Emergency lights blinked red along the walls. Other pods were opening now. He saw his crew members falling out, coughing and shaking just like he had. "Captain?" A weak voice called out. It was Hannah, his chief engineer. She was young but brilliant. She knew the Dawn better than anyone else. Right now, she looked like she had been dead for 100 years. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were alert and focused. "I'm here," Tejo said. His voice was rough and dry. "Status report." "What happened?" Hannah stumbled toward a control panel and started pressing buttons. Most of them did not respond. She tried again and again until finally a screen flickered to life. What she saw made her stop breathing. "Captain," she whispered. "The date. Look at the date." Tejo walked over and looked at the screen. He read the numbers 3 times because he could not believe them. 312 years had passed. "That's not possible," he said quietly. "The jump drive," Hannah explained, her voice barely working. "It didn't just move us through space. It moved us through time. Or maybe we were just floating in deep space all this time, too far from any star for anyone to find us. Either way, we've been gone for over 3 centuries. More crew members were waking up now. Tejo counted them as they emerged from their pods. 47 people. That was all that remained of the crew. The rest had not survived the long sleep. A young officer named June approached them. He was the ship's communications expert. His face was full of confusion and fear. "Sir, I'm picking up signals," June said. "Lots of them. But they're using frequencies I don't recognize." And the language. It sounds like our language, but different. Changed. Tejo felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. 300 years. Everything they knew was gone. Everyone they loved was dead. The war they had been fighting was ancient history now. But what had happened to humanity? Had they won? Had they lost? Can you find any human signals? Tejo asked. Jun worked at his console for several minutes. His face grew darker with each passing second. Finally, he looked up at his captain with horror in his eyes. Sir, I found human signals. Lots of them. But they're not military. They're not even civilian broadcasts. They're slave frequencies, work orders, population counts, punishment reports. The room went silent. The Valkyrie, Hana said slowly. They won. They conquered humanity. Tejo felt anger building inside him. He had lost everything fighting against these aliens. His friends, his family, his entire world. And it had all been for nothing. Humanity had fallen anyway, but then another thought came to him. If humanity had lost, why was the Eternal Dawn still flying? Why hadn't the Valkyrie found them and destroyed them centuries ago? We need more information, Tejo said firmly. Jun, keep monitoring those signals. Learn everything you can. Hana, I need you to check the ship's systems. Find out what still works and what doesn't. And what will you do, Captain? Hana asked. Te-Ho looked out through a small window at the stars. Somewhere out there, his people were suffering. Somewhere out there, the enemy thought they had won forever. I'm going to find out why we're still alive, he said. And I'm going to find out if there's any way we can fight back. Before anyone could respond, the ship shook violently. Alarms started screaming again. Jun ran back to his console and typed frantically. Captain, a Valkyrie warship is approaching. They're scanning us. Tejo's jaw tightened. The enemy had found them. After 300 years, the war was starting again. Battle stations, he ordered. Everyone to their posts. We didn't survive this long just to die now. The crew of the Eternal Dawn moved quickly despite their weakness. They had trained for this. They had fought for this. They were soldiers, and soldiers did not give up. Outside, Commander Drell watched the old human ship come to life. Lights appeared along its hull. Weapons systems powered up. The ghost was waking, and it looked angry. Drell smiled coldly. He had heard stories about human warships. Stories about how dangerous they had been during the Great Conquest. But those were just stories. Humans were weak now, broken. They had been slaves for 3 centuries. They had forgotten how to fight. He was about to teach these ancient humans the same lesson. But deep in his mind, in a place he did not want to look, Drell felt something strange. Something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear that the lost warship had returned. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Commander Drell stood at the front of his boarding team. 20 of his best soldiers waited behind him, their weapons ready. They were about to enter the human ship, and Drell wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. The airlock opened with a loud hiss. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of old metal and recycled oxygen. Drell stepped inside and looked around. The hallway was narrow and dark. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. Everything looked ancient and worn. Primitive, Drell muttered to himself. Just as I expected. His soldiers followed him inside. They moved carefully, checking every corner and every door. The ship was quiet except for the hum of distant machines. It felt like walking through a tomb. They found the first humans near the engine. Room. Captain Tejo stood in the middle of the corridor with 6 of his crew members. They held weapons that Drell had never seen before. The guns were bulky and rough, Nothing like the sleek energy weapons that the Valkyrie used. They looked like relics from a museum. "Stop where you are," Taeho said calmly. His voice echoed through the metal hallway. "You are on a human military vessel. Identify yourself." Drell laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel. "You dare give orders to me? Do you not know who I am? I am Commander Drell of the Valkyrie Empire. Your people have been our slaves for 300 years. You have no authority here." Taeho's eyes hardened. "I am Captain Taeho of the Human Defense Fleet. This ship belongs to humanity, not to your empire. Leave now, or we will defend ourselves." Drell raised one of his 4 arms and made a gesture. His soldiers aimed their weapons at the humans. The air became thick with tension. "You are outnumbered and outgunned," Drell said slowly. "Your weapons are ancient. Your ship is falling apart. Surrender now, and I might let your crew live as laborers instead of being executed." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Taeho smiled slightly. "You think our weapons are ancient," he said quietly. "Let me show you what ancient weapons can do." He fired. The blast from his rifle struck the wall next to Drell's head. The metal exploded outward, leaving a hole the size of a person's fist. Drell stumbled backward, his 4 eyes wide with shock. That was impossible. Human weapons during the conquest had barely been able to scratch Valkyrie armor. This shot had almost torn through reinforced steel. "Fire!" Drell screamed. His soldiers opened fire. Blue energy beams shot toward the humans. But Taeho and his crew were already moving. They dove behind corners and metal barriers. They returned fire with devastating accuracy. 2 Valkyrie soldiers fell in the first 3 seconds. Their armor had melted like butter under the human weapons. 3 more fell before Drell could even understand what was happening. "Retreat!" Drell yelled. "Fall back to the airlock." His remaining soldiers ran. They did not stop to help their fallen comrades. They did not stop to fight back. They simply ran as fast as they could while human bullets chased them through the corridors. Drell was the last one through the airlock. He sealed the door behind him and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. How was this possible? He had studied human history. He knew everything about the Great Conquest. Human weapons had been weak and ineffective. That was why the Empire had won so easily. That was why humanity had fallen in less than 50 years. But the weapons on that ship were different. They were stronger than anything Drell had ever seen. Stronger than modern Valkyrie weapons. Stronger than anything in the entire Imperial fleet. "Commander," one of his surviving soldiers said nervously. "What do we do now?" Drell straightened up and tried to look calm. Inside, he was terrified. But he could not let his soldiers see that. "We report to the High Council," he said. "They need to know about this immediately." Back on the Eternal Dawn, Captain Taeho lowered his weapon and looked at his crew. Nobody had been hurt. The old rifles had worked perfectly, just like they always had. "Is everyone all right?" he asked. Hannah nodded. She was holding a rifle of her own, though she had not fired it. "We're fine, Captain. But we need to talk. I found something in the ship's databanks. Something important." Taeho followed her to the main computer room. The screens were old and flickering, but they still worked. Hannah had spent the last few hours searching through centuries of stored information. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "These are the technical specifications for our weapons. Standard human military issue from 300 years ago." Taeho looked at the numbers. He knew them well. Every officer in the Human Defense Fleet had memorized these specifications. "I know what our weapons can do," he said. "What's your point?" Hannah pulled up another screen. "This is what I found when I scanned the Valkyrie weapons. The ones they tried to use against us. Tejo stared at the new numbers. Then he stared at them again. Then he looked at Hana with confusion in his eyes. "This can't be right," he said slowly. "Their weapons are weaker than ours. Much weaker. How is that possible? They conquered us. They destroyed our entire civilization." Hana's face was pale. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. I searched through all the historical records we have on the ship. Everything from before the conquest. And I found something strange." She pulled up a series of documents, reports, communications, scientific data. All of it was marked with high-level security clearances. "These are medical reports from the early days of the war," Hana explained. "They show that human soldiers were getting sick. All of them. Some kind of disease that affected their strength and coordination. It made them weak and slow. The doctors couldn't figure out where it came from or how to cure it." Tejo read through the reports. The more he read, the more his anger grew. "They poisoned us," he said quietly. "The Valkyrie didn't beat us in fair combat. They released some kind of biological weapon. They made us weak before they attacked." Hana nodded grimly. "That's not all. Look at this." She showed him another document. It was a scientific analysis of the disease. The report was incomplete, but one section stood out clearly. "The disease affects human DNA," Hana read aloud. "It passes from parents to children. Every generation born after infection will be weaker than the one before. Within 10 generations, humans will be completely dependent on Valkyrie medical treatment to survive." Tejo felt sick. 300 years had passed. That was at least 12 generations. Humanity hadn't just been conquered. They had been genetically crippled. "But we weren't infected," he said, hope entering his voice. "We left before the plague spread everywhere. Our DNA is clean." Hana looked at him with bright eyes. "Exactly. And there's more. The ship's medical database contains the original human genetic template. The way we were before the infection. Captain, we might be able to create a cure." For the first time since waking up, Tejo felt something other than despair. He felt hope that the Eternal Dawn wasn't just an old warship. It was a time capsule. It carried the truth about what the Valkyrie had done. It carried weapons that were stronger than anything the Empire had now. And it might carry the key to saving humanity. "We need to protect this ship," Tejo said firmly. "No matter what it costs. If the Valkyrie discover what we have, they'll destroy us and everything we know." "They already know we have powerful weapons," Hana reminded him. "They'll be back with a bigger fleet." Tejo nodded. "Then we need to move fast. Start working on that cure. I'll figure out how to get this information to the enslaved humans. Somewhere out there, billions of his people were suffering. They didn't know they had been poisoned. They didn't know they were being kept weak on purpose. They didn't know that their ancestors had been strong warriors who had almost defeated the Valkyrie Empire. But they would know soon. Captain." Tejo looked down at the stars and made a silent promise. The Empire had hidden the truth for 300 years. Now the truth was about to come out. And when it did, everything would change. The message spread like fire across dry grass. On Terra Nova, the largest human colony, a woman named Yuna stood in the center of a crowded room. She was tall and thin, with scars on her arms from years of hard labor. Her eyes were sharp and fierce. For the past decade, she had led a small resistance group, fighting against the Valkyrie in whatever small ways they could. Now she was watching Captain Tejo's message for the 10th time. "This changes everything," she said quietly around her. Other resistance members nodded. There were 50 of them in this hidden basement. Farmers, factory workers, teachers, ordinary people who had refused to accept slavery. They had been fighting a losing war for years. They had always known they were weaker than the Valkyrie. They had accepted it as a sad truth, but it wasn't true. It had never been true. "They poisoned us," said a young man named Day. His hands were clenched into fists. "My grandfather told me stories about the old days. He said humans used to be stronger, faster. Everyone thought he was just an old man telling lies. But he was right. We need to act," Eunice said firmly. "The eternal dawn is going to be destroyed. We can't let their sacrifice be for nothing. We need to spread this message further. We need to start organizing. But how?" asked an older woman named Sumi. "The Valkyrie control everything. They have soldiers on every corner. They watch our communications. How can we fight back when they're so much stronger than us?" Eunice smiled slightly. "They're not stronger. They were never stronger. They just made us believe they were." She turned to face the group fully. "Think about it. For 300 years, they've kept us weak with their plague. They've told us lies about the past. Why would they need to do that if they could beat us fairly? They're afraid of us. They've always been afraid of us." The words sank in slowly. Una could see it in their faces. The doubt was being replaced by something else. Something dangerous. Anger. "I know where the Valkyrie keep their weapons stored," Day said suddenly. "On the east side of the city. There's a supply depot with only a few guards. I work in the communications center," added another man. "I can access their network. Send messages without them knowing." "My brother drives supply trucks," said Sumi. "He can move people and materials without being searched." Una nodded at each of them. This was how revolutions began. Not with grand armies or powerful weapons, but with ordinary people deciding that they had suffered enough. "Spread the word," she ordered. "Every human on this planet needs to see that message. Every slave needs to know the truth. When the time comes to rise up, everyone needs to be ready." The resistance members scattered into the night. Within hours, the message would reach thousands more people. Within days, it would reach millions. On other worlds, similar scenes were playing out. The broadcast had reached every corner of the empire. Humans everywhere were learning the truth. And everywhere, the fire of rebellion was starting to burn. The Valkyrie were not blind to this. On the homeworld, High Counselor Veth called an emergency meeting. "The situation is worse than we thought," she announced grimly. "Reports are coming in from across the empire. Human slaves are becoming restless. There have been small uprisings on 17 worlds. Work output has dropped by 30%. "We should execute the troublemakers," suggested Council Mord. "Make an example of them. Show the humans what happens when they disobey." "We've tried that for 300 years," Veth replied coldly. "It hasn't stopped them from dreaming of freedom. And now they have something they never had before. They have hope." She waved her hand, and a holographic map appeared above the table. Red dots marked locations of reported incidents. There were hundreds of them, scattered across the galaxy. "One broadcast did this," Veth said. "One message from one ship. If we don't destroy the Eternal Dawn quickly, things will only get worse. The Third Fleet will reach them in 2 hours," Mord reported. "There is no way that single ship can survive against so many." "Good, but we need to do more than destroy the ship. We need to destroy the idea. Tell the humans that the broadcast was a lie. Fake evidence created by traitors. Will they believe that?" Veth's 4 eyes narrowed. "Some will. Some won't. But we only need to create enough doubt to slow the rebellion. Then we can crush it piece by piece." On the Eternal Dawn, Captain Taiho watched the approaching fleet on his screens. 2 hours had become one. One had become 30 minutes. Now the first Valkyrie ships were close enough to see with the naked eye. "All crew, report to battle stations," he announced over the intercom. "This is it. Whatever happens next, I want you all to know that I'm proud of you. We've done something important today. We've given our people hope. That's worth more than any of us." Hannah stood beside him on the bridge. She looked tired but determined. "I've uploaded the cure research to the broadcast signal," she said. "Even if we don't survive, someone else can continue the work. Someone else can finish what we started." "Thank you," Taeho said simply. Jun called out from his station. "Captain, I'm detecting something strange. Multiple small ships approaching from the opposite direction. They're not Valkyrie." Taeho frowned. "What are they?" "They're human ships. Old freighters and mining vessels. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. On the main screen, a new fleet appeared. It was nothing like the Valkyrie Armada. These ships were small and battered. Some were held together with patches and prayers. They were cargo ships and transport vessels that had been converted into something that might be called warships. A communication request came through. Taeho accepted it. A familiar face appeared on the screen. It was Yuna, the resistance leader from Terra Nova. "Captain Taeho," she said with a fierce smile. "You didn't think we'd let you fight alone, did you? How did you get here?" Taeho asked in amazement. "How did you organize this so quickly?" "We've been organizing for years," Yuna replied. "We just never had a reason to fight until now. When your message reached us, everything changed. People came out of hiding. Ships that had been kept secret for decades suddenly appeared. You gave us hope, Captain. Now we're here to fight for it." More ships were arriving every minute. Word had spread through hidden networks and secret channels. Humans from across the sector were gathering. Their ships were weak. Their weapons were old. But there were hundreds of them, and more were coming. "We're still outnumbered," Taeho said honestly. "The Third Fleet has the most powerful warships in the Empire." "Maybe," Yuna admitted. "But we have something they don't. We have nothing left to lose." The Valkyrie Fleet Commander, Admiral X, watched the gathering human ships with a mixture of confusion and contempt. These were civilian vessels, garbage scows and ore haulers. They had no military value whatsoever. "Should we delay the attack?" one of his officers asked. "Why would we do that?" X replied, "More targets just means more glory. We'll destroy them all and end this rebellion before it truly begins." He gave the order to advance. 300 Valkyrie warships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready, their crews eager for victory. On the other side, the human fleet waited. Farmers and miners and factory workers sat at controls they barely understood. They gripped weapons that might not even work. They faced an enemy that had ruled them for 300 years. But they were not afraid. For the first time in centuries, they were not afraid. Captain Taeho opened a channel to all human ships. "Today we fight," he said simply. "Today we remember who we are. Whatever happens, we face it together. As free people. As humans." 100 voices answered back. Some shouted battle cries. Some whispered prayers. Some simply said, "Ready." The two fleets closed in on each other. The galaxy held its breath. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The High Council of the Valkyrie Empire gathered in the Great Hall on their homeworld. 12 of the most powerful leaders sat around a massive table made of black stone. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing images of the human warship. Commander Drell stood before them, trying to hide his fear. He had never spoken to the High Council before. Most officers went their entire careers without seeing these chambers. Now he was here, and he was bringing terrible news. "Explain yourself," said High Counselor Veth. She was the oldest member of the council, and the most feared. Her 4 eyes stared at Drell without blinking. "You lost 15 soldiers to a handful of humans with primitive weapons. How is this possible?" Drell swallowed hard. High Counselor, the weapons were not primitive. They were incredibly powerful. More powerful than anything in our current arsenal. I have never seen anything like them. Murmurs spread through the council chamber. The other counselors exchanged worried glances. This was not what they had expected to hear. That is impossible, said another counselor named Mord. He was the Minister of Military Affairs. Human weapons were always inferior to ours. That is why we won the Great Conquest. With respect, Minister, Drell said carefully, I saw those weapons myself. I watched them tear through our armor like paper. Whatever those humans have, it is not inferior. High Counselor Veth raised one of her hands for silence. The room went quiet immediately. Show us the recordings, she commanded. Drell activated his personal device. The holographic screens flickered and changed, showing footage from his soldiers' helmet cameras. The council watched in silence as the battle played out. They saw the human weapons firing. They saw Valkyrie soldiers falling. They saw the devastating power of each shot. When the recording ended, nobody spoke for a long moment. This changes nothing, Beth finally said. Her voice was cold and hard. One ship cannot defeat our empire. We have 10,000 warships. We have billions of soldiers. We will send a fleet to destroy this vessel and recover its technology. High Counselor, Drell said hesitantly. There is more. My scanners detected large amounts of data stored in the ship's computers. Historical records. Scientific information. Medical files. If the humans on that ship share this information with the slave population, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Every counselor understood the danger. The Great Conquest had been built on a lie. The Valkyrie had not won through superior strength or better weapons. They had won through betrayal and poison. If the enslaved humans ever discovered this truth, the entire empire could collapse. Send a third fleet, Veth ordered. Destroy the ship. Kill everyone on board. Leave nothing behind. Far away, on the eternal dawn, Hannah worked without rest. She had converted one of the storage rooms into a laboratory. Old medical equipment hummed and beeped around her. Screens displayed complex genetic codes and chemical formulas. She had been working for 18 hours straight, but she could not stop now. The cure was possible. She could see it in the data. The Valkyrie plague had been clever, but it was not perfect. There were weaknesses in its design. Points where the right treatment could reverse the damage. But creating that treatment would take time. Time they might not have. How is it going? Captain Tejo asked, entering the room. Hannah looked up with tired eyes. I've identified the mechanism of the plague. It targets specific genes related to muscle growth and neurological function. That's why infected humans are weaker and slower than we are. Can you fix it? Theoretically, yes. The ship's database has complete records of healthy human DNA. I can use that as a template to create a genetic therapy. It would repair the damage and restore humans to their natural state. Tejo felt hope rising in his chest. How long will it take? Hannah's face fell slightly. Months, maybe years. I'm working with equipment that's 3 centuries old. And even if I create the cure, we'll need to distribute it to billions of people across hundreds of worlds. One step at a time, Tejo said gently. First we create the cure. Then we figure out how to share it. Chun's voice crackled over the intercom system. Captain, you need to come to the bridge. We have a problem. Tejo ran to the bridge with Hana close behind. What he saw on the main screen made his stomach drop. A fleet of Valkyrie warships was approaching. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. They filled the screen like a swarm of angry insects. They're not taking any chances, Jim said grimly. That's the third fleet, the Empire's most powerful battle group. Tejo stared at the approaching ships. The eternal dawn was strong, but it was only one vessel against hundreds. They could not win this fight. How long until they reach us? He asked. About 6 hours at their current speed. 6 hours. Not enough time to repair the ship. Not enough time to finish the cure. Not enough time for anything, but maybe enough time to do something else. John, Tejo said slowly, can we broadcast a message to the human slave populations? A wideband transmission that reaches every occupied world. John thought about it. Yes, but the Valkyrie will intercept it. They'll hear everything we say. Good, Tejo said with a cold smile. I want them to hear it. He turned to Hana. I need you to prepare a data package. Everything we've found. The proof of the biological weapon. The medical records. The original human genetic template. All of it. Hana understood immediately. You're going to tell everyone the truth. The Valkyrie have kept this secret for 300 years. They've convinced our people that they lost because they were weak, that they deserve to be slaves. I'm going to show them the truth. The next few hours passed quickly. Hana compiled all the evidence into a single data package. Jun configured the communication systems for maximum range. Tejo wrote and rewrote his message until every word was perfect. When everything was ready, Tejo sat down in front of the camera and took a deep breath. In a few minutes, billions of humans would hear his voice. This might be the most important speech anyone had ever given. Begin transmission, he ordered. The camera light turned green. Tejo looked directly into the lens and began speaking. My name is Captain Tejo of the Human Defense Fleet. I am speaking to you from the HSS Eternal Dawn, a warship that has been lost in space for over 300 years. What I am about to tell you will change everything you know about our history. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You have been told that humanity lost the Great Conquest because we were weak, because our weapons were inferior, because we were not strong enough to fight the Valkyrie Empire. This is a lie. Across the galaxy, humans stopped what they were doing. In mines and factories, in fields and kitchens, in dark cells and crowded dormitories, they listened. Before the war began, the Valkyrie released a biological weapon, a plague that targeted our DNA. It made us sick. It made us slow. It weakened us at the genetic level. Our soldiers fought bravely, but they were fighting while poisoned. That is the only reason we lost. Tejo held up a data chip. I have proof. Medical records from before and during the war. Scientific analysis of the plague. And most importantly, I have the genetic template for healthy human DNA. The way we were before the poison. The way we were meant to be. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. The cure is possible. We can undo what the Valkyrie did to us. We can restore our strength. But first, you need to know the truth. You are not weak because that is your nature. You are weak because they made you weak, because they were afraid of what you could do. On the Valkyrie homeworld, High Counselor Veth watched the broadcast in horror. On occupied worlds across the Empire, human slaves watched with tears streaming down their faces. In factories and fields and ships and stations, a fire was being lit. The Empire is sending a fleet to destroy us, Tejo continued. They want to bury this truth forever, but they are too late. You have heard my words. You have seen the evidence. The secret is out. He stood up, his voice rising. Remember who you are. Remember who you were. We are not slaves. We are not weak. We are humanity, and our time is coming again. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, silence fell. Then, slowly at first but growing stronger, something began to change. Hope had returned to the human race. And hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. The first shots of the battle lit up the darkness of space. Admiral Dex had expected a quick victory. He had expected the human ships to scatter and run. He had expected to crush this pathetic rebellion within hours and return home as a hero. He was wrong. The Eternal Dawn fired first. Its ancient weapons roared to life with devastating power. The lead Valkyrie cruiser exploded in a ball of fire before it could even raise its shields. 2 more ships died in the next 3 seconds. What is this? Vex shouted. How are their weapons so powerful? Nobody could answer him. Nobody understood. The human ship was 3 centuries old, but it was tearing through modern Valkyrie armor like it was made of paper. Captain Tejo stood at the center of his bridge, giving orders with calm precision. Target their command ships, he commanded. John, coordinate with the civilian fleet. Have them focus on the smaller vessels while we handle the big ones. Yes, Captain. The battle spread across thousands of kilometers. Valkyrie warships broke formation, trying to surround the human fleet. But the humans refused to play by the rules. They did not fight like a military force. They fought like desperate people with nothing to lose. Mining vessels rammed into Valkyrie destroyers, sacrificing themselves to take down larger enemies. Cargo ships loaded with explosives flew straight into enemy formations and detonated. Every human pilot seemed willing to die if it meant taking Valkyrie ships with them. On Terra Nova, Yuna commanded her makeshift fleet from the bridge of an old transport ship. Keep pushing forward, she shouted into her communicator. Don't give them time to regroup. Around her, the chaos of battle raged. Explosions flashed across her view screen. Communications were filled with screams and battle cries and final messages from dying ships. It was terrifying and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. But slowly, impossibly, the humans were winning. The Valkyrie fleet had superior numbers. They had better ships and better training. But they had never faced an enemy like this. For 300 years, they had fought against weakened humans who could barely lift weapons. They had forgotten what it meant to face an opponent who truly wanted them dead. Admiral Vex watched in horror as ship after ship was destroyed. His fleet was crumbling. His perfect formation had become a scattered mess. For the first time in his long military career, he felt genuine fear. Retreat, he finally ordered. All ships fall back to defensive positions. But it was too late. The human fleet pressed forward, smelling blood. The Eternal Dawn led the charge, its weapons never stopping, its shields holding against everything the Valkyrie threw at it. In the final hour of the battle, Admiral Vex's flagship was surrounded. Escape pods launched from its sides as the crew abandoned ship. Vex himself stayed at his post, too proud to run. When the killing blow came, it was from Captain Tejo himself. For everyone they enslaved, Tejo said quietly as he pressed the firing button. For every human who suffered under their rule. For 300 years of lies. The flagship exploded. Admiral Vex died without ever understanding how he had lost. When the battle ended, the human fleet had lost over half its ships. Thousands of people had died. But the Valkyrie Third Fleet was gone. Completely destroyed. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. Across the Empire, news of the battle spread faster than any message before. The greatest military force the Valkyrie possessed had been defeated by slaves and farmers. The truth could no longer be denied. On world after world, rebellions erupted. Humans who had lived in fear their entire lives suddenly found courage. They overwhelmed their guards. They seized control of weapons and ships. They fought back. High Counselor Veth watched the reports come in from her chamber on the homeworld. Each message brought worse news. Colony after colony was falling. Military bases were being overrun. The Empire was collapsing. This cannot be happening, she whispered. But it was happening. 3 centuries of control were unraveling in days. The secret that had built their empire had become the weapon that destroyed it. Months passed. The war continued, but the outcome was never in doubt. Captain Taiho became the leader of the human forces, though he never wanted the role. He simply wanted to see his people free. He worked alongside Yuna and the other resistance leaders to organize the scattered rebellions into a unified movement. Hana never stopped working on the cure. With resources captured from Volthuri medical facilities, her research advanced quickly. The first successful trials happened 6 months after the Battle of the Third Fleet. Within a year, the cure was being distributed across liberated worlds. Humans began to change. Children born after receiving the treatment were stronger and healthier than any generation in 300 years. Adults who received the cure reported feeling better than they ever had. The damage done by the Volthuri plague was slowly being undone. The final battle took place above the Volthuri homeworld itself. What remained of the Imperial fleet gathered to protect their planet. It was a fraction of what they once had, but still a significant force. On the other side, the united human fleet waited. Thousands of ships, old and new, military and civilian, gathered from every corner of what had been the Empire. Captain Taiho broadcast one final message to the enemy. "We did not start this war," he said. "Your ancestors did, 300 years ago, when they poisoned our people and stole our strength. We would have lived in peace if you had let us. But you chose conquest instead of cooperation. You chose slavery instead of friendship." He paused, looking at the planet on his screen. "Today, your empire ends. Not because we want revenge, but because we want freedom. Surrender now, and we will show you more mercy than you ever showed us." High Counselor Veth responded personally. Her 4 eyes were tired and defeated. "We will not surrender," she said. "We would rather die than live as you have lived." Taiho nodded slowly. "Then you will die. But know this. We will not enslave your people as you enslaved ours. We will not poison your children as you poisoned ours. When this war ends, we will offer your survivors the chance to live in peace. That is the difference between us." The battle began. It was shorter than anyone expected. The Volthuri fought bravely, but their hearts were not in it. Too many of them had seen the truth. Too many of them knew that their empire had been built on lies and cruelty. When the last Volthuri warship fell, a strange silence settled over the system. Humans looked at each other in disbelief. It was over. It was finally over. Yuna found Taiho, standing alone on the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn. He was staring out at the Volturi homeworld. His face was unreadable. "You did it," she said softly. "You freed us." Taiho shook his head. "I just woke up at the right time. This victory belongs to everyone. To you and your resistance fighters. To the pilots who sacrificed themselves. To every human who refused to accept slavery. What happens now?" Taiho turned to look at her. For the first time since he had awakened from stasis, he allowed himself to smile. "Now we rebuild. We create something better than what came before. An alliance of free humans and anyone else who wants to join us. No slaves, no secrets, no lies." He looked back at the stars. 300 years ago, I went to sleep thinking humanity was doomed. I woke up to find my people in chains. But I also found something else. I found courage and hope and the will to fight. Those things were never taken from us. They were just waiting to be remembered. The Eternal Dawn turned away from the conquered world and headed toward the stars. Its mission was complete, but its journey was just beginning. Behind it, a new age was dawning for humanity. The chains were broken. The truth was known. And the future, for the first time in centuries, belonged to them. The lost warship had returned. Its secrets had shattered the Empire. And humanity was finally free.